So this video is for people with MS or for people who know and are close to other people with multiple sclerosis. And it's kind of meant to be a little bit like those My MS Story videos. If you haven't seen those, I'll actually put a link here on the page to my own My MS Story video. There are a bunch of them online. I think they're really powerful. But this is different. This video is about my exacerbation timeline. And I'll just explain what that is and why I think it's really powerful to create an exacerbation timeline if you have multiple sclerosis. Alright, so I am someone who uses a lot of computers and software and stuff, but I actually created my exacerbation timeline on a piece of graph paper. And I'll just show you this. I won't show you all the details, but basically what it is that it starts over here in 1998 with my first exacerbation, and I've just got a little red box here and then the nature of the exacerbation, which was numb feet. And then it goes several years without another exacerbation, and the next one is in 2005. That's when my left arm went numb, and it just keeps moving on through the years. And I won't go through all the details, but as you can see on my exacerbation timeline, the exacerbations start coming fast and furious over time. And this timeline, it doesn't tell you too much about the quality of the exacerbation, like how bad it is, how severe or whatever, but it does, in my instance, my own particular instance with MS, just kind of show how these exacerbations have increased over time, right? We go with this first exacerbation and there's a lot of time between it, and then there's a little bit less time, and then a little bit less time, and then they start coming in pretty fast and furious. When I go over to this part on the exacerbation timeline, I didn't even have room to fit them all in. It was just too much stuff, multiple bouts of optic neuritis, etc. Let me show you a couple other ways I've displayed this data, or these data, and then I'll say why I think these exacerbation timelines are worth doing for yourself, like worth creating for yourself. I'm sure someone can figure this out in Excel. If you do, let me know, because I would love to be able to do this in Excel. Anyway, the other one, the second way I displayed the data was just exacerbations by year on this axis, and then month up on this axis. And so what this shows, and again, you won't be able to see this perfectly, is not only that there are more exacerbations over time. Clearly there are more dots over here as time moves on, time progresses, but also some kind of patterns, right? Like you've got 3 dots lined up here in January and 3 dots lined up in June, so kind of like middle of winter, middle of summer stuff going on. So some patterns there in terms of month. Again, this is just my own personal exacerbations having MS over time, over 17 years actually, and your exacerbation timeline would look a lot different. But it's pretty interesting to display those exacerbations in some different ways. First one in timeline, this one by month. And then this last way I did it, I think is even more revealing. And this is a really simple graph. Again, using the graph paper. All I did here is just chart the exacerbations by date, year on this side, and number per year right here. So really simple, right? So you got 1, 1, 1, and then over here you get 2, 2, and then 4, and then this year I've had 1. Awesome. I'll say something about that. 1 so far this year. And it's the middle of summer. Okay, but I digress. This is a really cool chart, I think, this timeline. It has the time here and it shows your incidence. For me, it shows that there's kind of like an exponential nature to the increase in the number of exacerbations. Severity has also gone up, but that's so subjective. Like for me, severity has to do with pain, but it also has to do with disability. So like when I have eye problems, optic neuritis and diplopia, I consider that pretty severe. But then when I have really severe pain on some of these exacerbations, that's also severe, but it's not as debilitating. Anyway, those are just 3 ways to display an exacerbation timeline. Again, one sort of, by number of incidents, one just a straight up timeline, like this one, just events over time. And then the other one, trying to get at a little bit of the significance of the different months. So I've showed you my timelines, and I'm just gonna say 5 things that I think is significant, 5 things that are significant about doing one of these exacerbation timelines, like answering the question like, why would you want to do this? And the first thing for me is that I realized that over these 17 years, I've had 12 exacerbations. I've had some pseudo exacerbations and some other things that are kind of lingering, but really 12 big incidents where I had a flare up and things went down in my central nervous system. I had thought it was more like 50 or 25 incidents. So for me, one of the real takeaways here was that it helped me to kind of quantify in an objective way what's been going on with me over time, as opposed to just thinking, oh man, things are going to hell in a handbasket, or I've had so many problems over the years. In some ways those things are true. The incidence has been going up and I have had trouble increasingly over the years, but I've had 12 exacerbations. So that's one thing, one takeaway that's valuable, I think, is that you get a real handle on what's been happening with you. The second is that you can see some patterns if you do this, and if you chart the data in different ways. Patterns in terms of like the time of year that things tend to go badly for you, if they do, or time of year when things are going pretty great. The other pattern is one of frequency, right? So you can tell how frequent these are in terms of numbers per year, numbers per month, etc. And another thing for me that was revealing when I started putting these down on paper is that I started to see what parts of my body have been affected, right? I've had like 3 incidents, 3 red dots that involve my eyes, and, my brain, and like 4 or 5 that have involved my lower extremities. So, just things like that I think can be revealing and, just give you a little bit insight as to what's going on with you. All right, the third reason I think creating an MS exacerbation timeline is important, or a graph of some kind, is that it can tell you something about the effectiveness of your response or your caregiver's response. I'm not someone who's been on any MS related medication. Instead, I've been quote unquote treating this with a kind of combination of attending to diet and exercise and rest and stress levels and vitamin D levels and probably 3 or 4 other things I'm not thinking of. So over time, I think as I continue to move forward with this, I think that this is going to tell me a little bit about if this is effective or not. And I think for you, if you're on Tysabri, or maybe you're on Gilenya or Copaxone or any of the disease-modifying therapies, if you're on one of those, you may be able to just chart the effectiveness of that treatment over time, see it's increasing or diminishing or changing, etc. So I think it really tells you something like hard, factual data about the effectiveness of your response. Number 4 takeaway for me in putting this together, and I'm a little cautious to say this, but I think it gives you a little bit of a prediction of the future, especially in this timeline here, which is just straight up numbers of exacerbations per year. As you can see, a prediction of the future looking at this is that from few exacerbations with many years between them to many exacerbations with no years between them in just a few months is a prediction that the future is not looking great for me. Or it wasn't looking great, maybe, I'm crossing my fingers here, until I started to attending to my MS with some interventions. So I think there's a little bit of a way that this can sort of predict a future, which I know for many people is kind of disturbing and not always great, but for me it's kind of eye-opening to see the reality of those dots on the page. And then the last thing I'll say about this, and the reason why I want to make this video and just kind of put this out there, for me, creating this exacerbation timeline and sort of tracking exacerbations over time in kind of like a narrative way and in writing and lists and these different charts, for me, it gives me a little bit of a sense of control. Maybe that's too strong a word. A sense of, and I put in my notes here, a sense of tracking myself and tracking what's happening to me, and that's just a little bit empowering. It's not the same as a cure. It's not the same as like a miracle that makes MS just go away and become as significant as like acne or gray hair or something like that. But for me, I think that tracking these episodes and seeing them on paper, and this past year adding a couple new ones when I had some optic neuritis in one eye than the other, that tracking is just a little bit liberating. It's not as great as a miracle, but I think it is a little bit liberating, and it's settling a little bit. It makes that avalanche of MS into something a little bit more mellow, a little bit less of an avalanche, and just a little bit more tame. All right, so those are my thoughts on this process of creating an MS exacerbation timeline and displaying that information in some different ways. Hit me a thumbs up if you appreciate this video. I would love to hear in the comments from anyone else out there who's got multiple sclerosis. If you've done this, maybe you've done something differently, and if you've done this on Excel, I would love to see those spreadsheets. Maybe we could share them online or something like that. I'd be happy to make a simple website to share those, and if I do that, I will put a link right here in the video. But that'll be some time from the creation of this initial video. All right, thank you.